Hey everyone, welcome to a special bonus episode of Locked On Lakers. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. The Lakers have a coach, and it's exactly the coach we all thought they'd have when they fired the old coach, JJ Redick. It's a 4-year deal. We'll break it down next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, or maybe your third or fourth, depending on the time of day. For these sorts of emergency podcasts, Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 24,000 subscribers, all of whom are excited that our long national nightmare, or at the very least our long local nightmare, is over. The Lakers have a coach. It is JJ Redick, the very coach that most people assumed they were going to be hiring about a month ago. But they landed on their guy, and with a Dan Hurley flirtation in the middle there. But ultimately, Andy, this coaching search ended pretty much where it started.
I mean, it's funny. You have to separate the guy that was hired, JJ Redick, and there are plenty of intriguing and nervous qualities to this hire that we will get into both during this show and the longer show inevitably coming for Friday. And the process of hiring JJ Redick, which just at this point feels very typical Lakers. This is just how they hire the majority of their coaches. It never seems particularly easy, smooth, or in a way that reassures the fan base or maybe even the players themselves, or maybe even the front office themselves, that they are running like a Swiss watch. But that is also a very separate story, one we've talked about before, and one I'm sure we'll talk about more over the coming days. But the bottom line is they have the coach in hand, Redick, at least now a week before the draft, a week and change before free agency, and they can start getting moving on some very important items.
Yeah, I mean, it's there will still be a lot of interesting postmortem on kind of how all this happened, and when was Dan Hurley, the candidate, all this sort of the storyline that's been attached to all this stuff. But for practical purposes, for stuff that actually matters, it is the things that you're talking about, Andy. It's the ability to have a coaching staff in place before next week's draft. The draft is next freaking week, and free agency starts right after that. And yes, I know the Lakers were trying to prepare people for the concept that, we don't have to have a coach. And you're like, you kind of do. If you're going to maximize the process and make sure that everybody is on the same page, that you feel like you're giving your coach the best opportunities to work with a roster that makes sense philosophically with what he wants to do. You want to give him the best opportunity to hire assistant coaches. And now the Lakers get to do that before both the Pistons and Cleveland. They can start that process. I assume Redick is and has been reaching out to people, and very not surprising, but very interesting that the early reporting on this has emphasized that they will be looking for experience. Again, not surprising, but those guys can be a little more difficult to lure. They sometimes cost a little more money. And so every day that you have an advantage over other people trying to fill out their coaching staffs is significant. And, just this needed to get done. Probably needed to get done faster than it did, but it needed to get done.
Yeah, and before we even get too far ahead of ourselves, the news broken by Woj, ESPN, on Twitter, quote, JJ Redick has agreed on a 4-year contract to become the next coach of the Los Angeles Lakers. Rob Pelinka offered job this morning, and Redick's started working on a staff to surround himself with experience. Pelinka became sold on Redick's ability to connect with players and his basketball IQ, and believes surrounding him with an elite coaching staff will help shorten the learning curve into his first coaching job, sources said. Later in his report, he noted that Redick obviously has a strong relationship with Lebron James, the basketball podcast, Mind the Game. Side note, very curious to see what becomes of that show specifically and Redick's podcasting empire in general. Per Shams, Jovan Buha, and Sam Amick, it is a 4-year deal, roughly $8 million per season. More from their reporting. Multiple sources with direct knowledge of the meeting described the most recent formal and presumably last meeting with Redick, described him as, quote, impressive during his visit to Los Angeles, diving deep into his offensive and defensive philosophies and displaying the passion for the sport that foreshadowed a willingness to submit himself to the countless working hours for the modern head coach. He explained his decision-making process when it comes to strategy, how the analysis and empirical evidence would always guide his choices rather than preconceived notions or outdated beliefs. Also, Redick talked about elevating AD's involvement, especially late in games, which you and I had wanted to see a lot of over the course of the season, alleviating the constant ball handling duties on LeBron, utilizing him more off ball. Obviously, that is a big concern for LeBron with 40 approaching, and just different ways that he would look to utilize different players that, if nothing else, are presumably going to be on the roster moving forward.
But this is why it's so important to have all of this stuff in place before you start going on. Because look, I don't know if JJ Redick is going to be a good coach. I think he is as likely as any candidate could be to be one of these guys who can skip everything and go straight to the front of the line, so to speak, with an incredibly high pressure job. That said, it's, there's having a first time head coach, Darvin Ham, depending on how you want to look at it, Luke Walton. And sometimes that can be successful and sometimes not. And then there's first time being a coach. And so if you're going to maximize that guy's opportunity, Andy, to succeed, you want to make sure, like, if he's got specific philosophies, how we want to involve Anthony Davis, what kind of guard play we need, if we're going to move LeBron away from the ball and give him more breaks, like, the individual personnel matters. Like, and you can't just make those decisions on behalf of your coach. Like, your coach needs to have input on, here's the kind of player that I want, because I want to do X, Y, and Z. I want these 3 or 4 skill sets to really unlock what it is that I'm trying to do. And like, Redick is a really smart guy. There's no question about that. But you do have to surround him and really, truly maximize the opportunities for him to get better. I mean, everything that you see here in this early reporting sounds encouraging. It sounds modern. It sounds exactly like you would expect to hear from JJ Redick as your next head coach. As an NBA, based on what he said in his podcast as a former player and broadcaster and all that.
Well, I mean, what it sounds like is the type of situation that would make you want to go buy a ticket to watch the Lakers in person. And
evaluate these things yourself, Andy.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Game Time. And when I was around 12 or so, the police were on the Synchronicity Tour, really hot ticket. I could not get seats. But then I said, you know what? No big deal. I will just catch the next police tour when it comes around. And it turns out there was no next police tour. They broke up right after that tour. And I said, Carpe diem. I will never miss out on a concert that I want to see. And that is why I love Game Time. It's a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy shows, and theater near you, with killer deals on last minute tickets and the best price guarantee. You can stop stressing over the tickets, start getting hyped for the fun. They've got all in pricing. You can toggle to show the total up front, so there is no surprise fees at the checkout. The Game Time guarantee means you will always get the best price. If you find the same tickets in the same section or row for less, Game Time credits you 110% of the difference. It is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. So snag the tickets without the stress using Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Locked On Lakers also brought to you by Prize Picks. What is Prize Picks, you might be asking? Well, I'll tell you. It's America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It's the most fun, exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less than on 2 or more player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. With Prize Picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game. Watching your favorite sports this summer, you make a Prize Picks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. You just need to pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app. 5 million active members. You get in on the daily action with your friends. Become part of the Prize Picks community today. How do you do it? You go to the app today, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go download the PrizePicks app today. You use the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
And you mentioned before, Brian, that JJ Redick is, as far as first-time head coaches go, at least potentially situated to succeed as any others. And we've talked about before how we can both understand the intrigue with JJ Redick. He is obviously a very, very good communicator. He's obviously a very, very smart guy. He is obviously extremely passionate about basketball. He is always known in his playing career as a really, really sick competitor. Like, he is just really, really super ultra competitive. He is somebody that I think is, you can see this again from the media work that he has done and the way he rose up those ranks, somebody that I think sets out to do all of the work and all of the steps necessary to get himself to the top of whatever task as quickly as possible. He is somebody that maximized his talents as an NBA player. He was never going to be a star. You know, he was a star at Duke, but the likelihood of him being a star as an NBA player was low because he just didn't have those type of tools, but he absolutely maximized what he had. He was very respected in locker rooms. All of those things add up to at least intriguing potential. But as we've also pointed out over the month and a half that this process has played out, that to some degree, you are betting on wish casting potential and vibes in a lot of way with JJ Redick. And that's not to take away from all the positives we listed because they're sincere. But there's a serious leap of faith involved. We both said, again, over the course of the last 6 to 8 weeks, that Redick is not likely the guy, at the very least, that we would have zeroed in on as quickly as they did, seemingly from the beginning. Both of us weren't, I would say it's too strong to say we were against the hiring of JJ Redick, but he is not who either one of us, I think.
Listen, I like the concept of David Adelman, guys like that a little bit more.
I like the concept of Sam Cassell. I was intrigued by Micah Nori, which isn't to say that we hate the idea of Redick. I don't hate the idea of Redick, but I do think this is a real dice roll by Rob Pelinka. And as much as there are going to be people who will run with the narrative of this is just appeasing LeBron, this is hiring the guy LeBron wants, his podcast partner, and it's another way to just slough off responsibilities if this thing goes poorly, or he doesn't even have to worry about that because Redick is the starriest hire they could have had, and the Lakers are a star effort organization, so this is kind of predictable. The reality is, if Jeannie Buss is taking stock at this point forward, if for whatever reason Redick doesn't work out and really starts thinking about, okay, is a reevaluation necessary? Rob Pelinka has to be front and center because this is his third coach since 2019. So there's a dice roll happening.
It is. I mean, it's a dice roll for the organization, regardless of whether or not you're talking about Pelinka or whose job security or whatever. If it is a major risk, and we can talk about the ramifications if it doesn't pay off. But I just think, and we'll get more into this for tomorrow's show. Whether you're talking about the next steps are nailing the staff, putting as much experience, checking a lot of boxes in terms of guys who are really good X's and O's guys who are really good communicators between the coaching staff and the players, guys who are really good at being connectors and player development and all these other things, all this stuff that you're going to need to do to maximize your potential. That making sure that every signing is as on point as it possibly can be, given the Lakers' limitations. That every trade is it's going to be the roster and the architecture that's going to give Redick the best chance to be good fast. Yep. And the Lakers, and then they need to, I'm sure we'll talk a lot about this for tomorrow. The Lakers will then need to honor this theme that they've been putting out of being more focused on culture, on organizational changes, on really, on developing programs, on what sounds essentially like having realistic expectations and not hiding behind banners for everything, and trying to figure out a way to get off this carousel. So we'll see if Redick's the right guy. Certainly it's going to make our jobs much more interesting from a content standpoint. This is great. I am 100% in support of it. So we'll see what happens. We'll get back to, as more news will keep rolling in over the course of the day. We will, of course, be back with a full show tomorrow. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to see the show, hang out with over 24,000 subscribers. Leave questions, leave comments, what you think about JJ Redick. We'll see everyone tomorrow.